Hello everyone. Today we're talking about the history and development of the Italian language, along with the other Romance languages. If you're watching this video, it probably means that you have at least a small interest in learning Italian, and that's awesome. Learning any new language is a huge accomplishment. Before we begin our lessons on learning how to speak Italian, it's important to understand a bit of history. Well, it's actually a lot of history, because we're going to be covering hundreds of thousands of years. But don't worry, we'll get through it quickly. I hope you guys are ready, because we are just getting started. So let's start at the very beginning, with the question, why do we speak different languages anyway? I mean, where did they all come from? And why are there so many? There are over 6,500 languages spoken all around the world. Yeah, that's 6,500 languages. Let's go back in time, to about 6 million years ago. Scientists believe that the first humans actually came from Africa. They say that humans stayed in Africa for 4 million years before they began to travel and explore the world around them. We can assume that the early people had a similar form of communicating because they were so close together. Now, the groups of people began to travel and explore the world because the food and water was not enough for them anymore. The combination of the distance between people and lots of time passing by is what created these languages that are very different from one another. This explanation makes the most sense, but there are also other stories that reveal why we speak different languages. In the book of Genesis, there's a story known as the Tower of Babel. In this story, the people believed that God lived in the mountains. For them, mountains meant greatness and strength and power. They decided to build a tower, hoping that it would be as great and grand as the mountains. This upset God because the people began to believe that they could become more powerful, and so God punished them. As punishment, God separated the people into different languages so they could no longer understand one another. Because they didn't understand each other anymore, the new groups separated into what will become their new countries and cultures. Even though it's difficult to explain exactly why we speak different languages, we do know that languages change over time, and they continue to grow and evolve as we do. From hieroglyphics and cave paintings, and the art of storytelling and theater, feather pens and scrolls, to the way we communicate today. It's all so fascinating. But let's stay on track. We're supposed to be talking about Italian today. There are about 12 families of languages, and Italian falls under the Romance language family. The Romance languages include French, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, and Romanian. When I say romance, this is not what I'm talking about. The word romance actually means that it comes from the Romans. You remember the Romans? Well, at the height of the Roman Empire, when Julius Caesar was emperor, the Romans had taken over most of Europe and some of North Africa. Now, the Romans spoke Latin, so when they were conquering these lands, their language followed with them, and so the newly conquered territories had to speak Latin as well, so they learned it over time. During the Roman Empire, there was a large gap between the rich and the poor. This means that you were either very rich or very poor. There was nothing in between. Only the rich people went to school because they could afford it. It was very common for the poor people not to get an education because it was better for them to work on the farm and help their families. This is important to note because, remember, the new language is Latin in the country, but they're not learning the real Latin because they're not going to school. So they're speaking a sort of slang Latin, also known as vulgar Latin. Over the years, these different variations of slang Latin eventually developed into complete languages that are very different from one another. and these are known as dialects. Now, each country can have any number of dialects. In Italy, there are 34 dialects spoken around the country. You can actually see the transition of the various dialects if you travel from Portugal to Italy. Stopping at the local cities and listening to the dialect, you will hear it similar to the city next door. So Italy had all these dialects, but it still had not claimed its official language until the 1300s, when Dante Alighieri in Tuscany wrote the book The Divine Comedy. The Divine Comedy is a series of 3 books which quickly became known as the greatest works of literature ever written. Dante's writing was so popular that the country eventually adopted his dialect as the official language of Italy. So when you're learning to speak Italian, you're actually learning how to speak Toscano. Nowadays, Italian is taught in all schools, and the use of dialects is slowly fading away. We still have our grandparents and the elderly that speak dialect very often, and we can always learn from them. It's important to learn about your culture and your country's history, because it's also part of your story, and it's what makes us all different from one another, and this is beautiful. No matter who you are or where you come from, you add something special to the world. I hope you enjoyed this movie and that you learned something new. Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to like below and subscribe to my channel. You can also get more learning material at HeyRis.com. I look forward to hearing from you. A dopo!